Sangye Chödan Tsogye Chonam La Chanchu Padu Dani Kyatsushi Tagi Chöje Gipe Sonam Ki Yola Penche Sangye Trupa Shu Sangye Chödan Tsogye Chonam La Chanchu Padu Dani Kyatsushi Tagi Chöje Gipe Sonam Ki Chola Penche Sangye Duba Shu Sangye Chödan Tsogye Chonam La Chanchu Padu Dani Kyatsushi Tagi Chöje Gipe Sonam Ki Chola Penche Sangye Duba Shu Tanje Duje Nidone Da Tuje Pangpe De Tampe Chune Tenje Be Kodam De La Chao So So, just to summarize a little bit of what we have discussed yesterday. So yesterday we discussed about understanding and recognizing the preciousness of this human life, and as well as how rare and difficult it will achieve, and often again in the future. And so thereby making this human life meaningful and not wasted by engaging in the practice of the Dharma. And not only we have this precious human life, but it does not last forever. And so there comes when the death will come, and we never know when the death will come. So not only we need to practice the Dharma before the death comes, but since we do not know when it is coming, so we should start practicing now without postponing it. And so prepare ourselves. So whenever death comes, that we are prepared for that, because we have already started practicing. And so when if the death comes anytime, we have less regret, we are more prepared, and so therefore we can have peaceful dance sessions, calm, peaceful dance sessions. And then also we also discuss after the death, the life does not stop. The consciousness, even though the body stops, the consciousness, the continuity of consciousness will continue and take new form of life. And then what kind of life that we will take, whether one of the lower realms or one of the higher rebirth, it depends on our karma. If we have a stronger negative karma, then we will be one of the unfortunate lower rebirth. And if we have more stronger positive karma, then we have one of the higher rebirth within the samsara. And if we are born in one of the lower realms, and then the suffering is much more intense, more unbearable, and also to practice the Dharma is very minimum, very difficult to practice the Dharma. Also, so with that kind of understanding and realization, then we cultivate a strong wish to not to take rebirth in such, and therefore we take refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And after taking refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, then we try to keep not only take the refuge, but after taking the refuge, then we try to keep the commitments, practice the commitments without diluting it. And on a minimum level, trying to refrain from engaging 10 non-virtuous actions and engaging 10 virtuous actions. And when we practice that, when we are able to refrain from engaging into harming others through our thoughts, speech and act, and instead we engage in the more helpful, beneficial, positive thoughts, speech and actions. So when we practice that and when we live our life on the basis of that, then definitely you can be assured that you will have a higher rebirth and not one of a lower rebirth. And in that way we are able to protect ourselves from the lower rebirth and the suffering of the lower rebirth. And then even if we have, through that kind of practice, even if we have a higher rebirth within the samsara, as long as we are still in samsara, then again we are not free from the suffering itself. Even though we might be free from certain, much more intense suffering and more gross suffering and much more unbearable suffering, but still we are not free from the suffering. And so there we will continue to again experience the suffering, and we will continue to create cause and conditions, such through the negative karma, non-virtuous actions, cause of more suffering in the futures. And so there is no end to the suffering. It is only temporary relief from more intense sufferings. And so therefore, then if you want to free from suffering, not only the intense suffering, but even the more subtle suffering, and not only free from the suffering temporarily, but if you want to free permanently from all the suffering, then we need to free ourselves from the whole samsara itself, from all the realm of samsara. And to do that, then we need to have a strong wish for the strong determination, strong inspiration, strong wish to achieve nirvana or liberations and to free from the sufferings and the samsara. And to have that strong wish, we need to have better understanding of the nature of samsara, the nature of suffering, and the shortcoming of the suffering, the fault of the suffering, and the samsara. And so I think we discuss up to that. And Lama Tsongkhapa will continue the same verses that in order to free from the samsara, then definitely we need to free from the cause that lead to samsara and that lead to suffering state. And in order to free ourselves from that cause and to overcome that cause and cultivate the cause, then we need to know how we get caught up in samsara and due to the cause, due to the second noble truth, the truth of origination. And so then, so I think we will continue there. So we are in verse number 13. If you do not make an effort to think about true suffering and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. So I think that's up to that we discuss yesterday. If you do not consider the stages whereby true origin of all this suffering plays and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means to cutting the very root of this vicious cycle. And therefore, you should cherish exuding total disgust and renunciation of such existence by knowing which factors bend you into its will. I, the yogi, the practitioner, Lama Tsongkhapa himself, have practiced just that, and you who also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So then, in order to free ourselves from the samsara and the suffering, then we have to first understand how we continue to take the birth in samsara, and how we continue to be bound and tied up in this vicious cycle of samsara and the suffering that we experience in the samsara realms. And then to understand that better, then we have to understand the cause or origin of the samsara and the suffering. So then Buddha explained the cause of our suffering and the cause of our samsaric existence is our own actions, karma, and the defilement, the delusions under which we create that contaminated karma. So the contaminated karma and the delusions are the two main cause and origin of the suffering and the samsara. Again, as we mentioned yesterday, from Buddhist point of view, as Buddha explained, that all our experience, whether it is pleasant, happiness experience, or unpleasant, suffering and painful experience, is a result of our own actions. And that being the case, definitely our suffering state, all the suffering that we experience in samsara and samsaric state itself is a result of our own action. And those actions or karma is created due to delusions. So even though the karma and the delusions is the cause and origin of the suffering and samsara, among them the delusion is worse. Because even we might have created so many cause, karmic seeds to experience sufferings or to experience rebirth within the samsara realms, those can be purified, as we explained, as we mentioned yesterday. Those negative karma, contaminated karma, can be purified. But if we have the delusions, even if we purify all previous karma, we continue to create new karma. So it's never ending. It's like you purify it, again, immediately you started creating, and again you kind of started purifying it, again immediately you start creating because of the delusions. And so therefore the delusion is the very root and the worst of those two causes. And when we talk about delusions, then you find in Buddhist literatures, it is defined. The delusion is defined as something mental factors that when it arises within the person or within the sentient beings, that disturb person's mind, that disturb the peace of the person's mind. that agitate the person's mind is described as the delusions. And then when it, in many of the other teachings such as Abhidhamma Kosha and Vasubandhu Abhidhamma Koshas or Treasure of the Knowledge, and also Asanga's the higher Abhidhamma, they describe and explain about 6 root delusions and 21 secondary delusions. So, and again, within those 6 root delusions, then you find very often the 3 poisonous delusions, the very root of that, and that is the anger, attachment, and the ignorance. So, and all other delusions are extensions from one of those, or 2 of those, or 3 of those, of different, like for example, hatred, resentment, grudges come from anger, you know. For example, jealousy, greediness, miserliness, those come from attachments. And so a lot of those delusions arises from either one of them, 2 of them, 3 of them. It's an extension of that. So if you go back, then it comes to the very root of that. And if you go even further, then even the anger and hatred comes from the very fundamental ignorance. So then it comes to that. That fundamental ignorance. And so as it is, yeah. So if we, it's very clear if we observe our own experience when we are overwhelmed by anger, how destructive it is. We all more or less have some understanding of that. How destructive it is for us and how destructive it is for people around us. How not only how it makes our life miserable when you are overwhelmed by anger, hatred. Also, you make people around you miserable because of your anger and hatred. And it doesn't have to make someone miserable because of my anger. My anger doesn't have to be directed toward that person. Okay? I could be very angry and upset about the political situation now in this country, let's say. Or I might be very upset and angry with the president itself or some other people. So my anger is not directed toward any of my family members, friends, that with whom I spend most of my time. But when I'm in that energy of anger and hatred, they can feel that energy, and it is not a good energy. It is not a good energy. And when we are in that, when we are kind of overwhelmed by that kind of strong energy of that, then even small things can trigger us to lose our mind very easily. So in a conversation with our families or friends, even small things can trigger us, make us very upset, angry, because your mind is already agitated. Because your mind is already not peaceful and agitated. And so very small thing can kind of make us lose our mind and then get into a big conflict, And so it hurts and harms you, and it hurts and harms the people around yourself. It makes you miserable and people around yourself. So, we can talk so much about that, but won't go so much details on that. And then that we know, attachments doesn't seem as destructive as anger directly, But indirectly, attachment is the worst, much more worse than the anger, from many different angles. From one perspective, anger, even though it's very destructive, it arises once a while, not every day, not 24 hours. Attachments is involved all the time. From that perspective, almost like 24 hours. Of course, sometimes in a very subtle way, sometimes in more gross way. And then if you see, even most of the anger arises from attachment. Because I might be attached to my well-being or well-being of my family, my friend. So anything that I feel that there is obstacle for that well-being, then I start to have that bad feelings, anger and hatred for that. And because I don't have attachment to my enemy, if someone creates obstacle for their well-being, I wouldn't be so upset and angry. Because I'm not attached to that person. So, even he suffer, it wouldn't disturb me so much, make me angry. But anything to anyone who I'm very attached to, then if I ever feel that there is possibility, then I get upset and angry about that. We get angry and upset. So with that, we know, and so that is one example. But same, if we observe, why do we get angry and upset about certain things? A lot of times there is attachment involved. So from that perspective, again, and from that perspective also, why attachment is much more worse is the cause of anger and hatred. From another angle, when we talk about taking this rebirth of endless vicious cycle of the samsara rebirth, and when we talk about from 12 link, in the first link, then due to ignorance, then second, we create the karma, and that karmic seed is planted in the third link, consciousness, and at the time of death, then that seed is activated by craving and grasping, the 8 and 9. And by having activated by craving and grasping, that seed is fully potentialized to produce the result. That's the 10th, the becoming. And then in next life, then we have the 6th result of that. And so that is name and form, and then the 6 senses or faculties, and contact, and then feeling, and birth, and aging and death. So these are the results. So when you see that is how to the completion of the 12 link, then we take a rebirth in samsara and we suffer that way. So when you see, in order to take a rebirth within the samsara, due to ignorance, even though we might have created the karma to take a rebirth, and even the karmic seed has been planted in our consciousness, but it has to be activated. If it doesn't get activated, it cannot produce the result samsara rebirth. To it be activated, it has to be activated by craving and grasping, and that is attachment. So if you don't have the attachment, then those, even we might have billions of karmic seed to take rebirth in samsara, none of them can produce the result, the samsara rebirth, because there is no cause condition to activate that anymore. So it is like a seed, and that never gets, there is the potential for that to grow, but it never gets water. Okay? For it to produce that, it needs the water. And so when there is no water, you can have that seed with the potential, but it never blossom into the plant. Same way, if we don't have craving and grasping, then that cannot be activated. So that is like the water activating that seed. And so from that perspective, in terms of how we continue to take rebirth in the samsara endlessly, the attachment plays main role in that. And from that perspective, the anger doesn't play that role. And from that perspective, we can see how attachment is much more worse. So you can see from many different perspectives how attachment is much more worse. And of course, then if you go, then is the worst is the ignorance, the fundamental, because that is the one give rise to even the attachment and the anger and all the other delusions. So, of course, there are many different meditation and practices that act as counter as an antidote and overcome that. For example, for anger, the practice of patience, the practice for loving kindness, compassion, and act as an antidote. Encounter the anger, and in attachment to the antidote, the practice to overcome the attachments. Meditation on, for example, impermanent. Meditation on the nature of samsara, nature of sufferings, impurity of the object. Meditation on essence less of the objects, that the object that we are attached to, that has no really meaning, no really essence in that. And meditation on kind of the unattractiveness, the ugliness of the object of that we are attached to. Basically, trying to see the whatever unattractive qualities that might be in that object, the focusing on that. So those then encountering the antidote to the ignorance is the meditation on 12 link the meditation on emptiness, the meditation on interdependence. So those are some of the we can apply. So in order to stop the suffering permanently and all the suffering, then we have to stop the samsara rebirth. If we don't have samsara rebirth, then we wouldn't have all the suffering that comes because of samsara rebirth, because of the aggregate that is the result of contaminated karma and delusions. In order to stop such kind of aggregates or rebirth, samsara rebirth aggregate, then we have to stop the contaminated actions of karma. In order to stop the contaminated action of karma, then we have to stop the delusions that motivate us to create that kind of contaminated actions. In order to stop and overcome the delusions, then we have to overcome the very root of those delusions. That is the fundamental ignorance. And so, the fundamental ignorance, which mistakenly apprehend the self, your aggregates, and all phenomena as truly inherently existing. So that's the fundamental ignorance. And to overcome that, then we need to develop the wisdom that realizes and the self, your aggregates, such as your body, your mind, and all phenomena, empty of truly existing, empty of inherent existence. And so through that wisdom, when we are able to cultivate that wisdom that realizes or understand the ultimate truth or reality of self and other phenomena, as being empty of inherently existing, empty of truly existence, that cuts the fundamental ignorance that grabs as truly and inherently existence. So by overcoming the ignorance, then we overcome the delusion that arises from that, and by overcoming delusion, then we overcome the action that is created on the basis of delusion, and by overcoming that action, then we overcome the samsara rebirth, which is a result of such actions, and by overcoming samsara rebirth, then we overcome the suffering that comes because of samsara rebirth. And so that is how we can free permanently from the samsara and the suffering. So with that, then we have understanding of the truth of cessation, truth of origination, and then the cessations, which is total freedom from the samsara, total freedom from the contaminated karma and delusion is possible because delusion, all this delusion can overcome, and because all delusion can overcome, because the root of those delusion can be overcome, the ignorance, cessation is possible, nirvana is possible. And so if nirvana is possible, if cessation is possible, if total freedom from the samsara and suffering is possible, so then what is the path and the way to reach that cessation, that nirvana, and then that is the fourth, the noble path. And so the path is the way to reach that cessation, the way to attain that nirvana, the way to free permanently, fully from the samsara and the suffering, all the sufferings. And so then, in terms of the path, then the path is the Eight Noble Path. And if we summarize that, it can be summarized into three higher trainings. And the higher training of moral discipline, higher training of concentrations, and higher training of wisdom. So again, as we mentioned, in order to overcome that fundamental ignorance, we need to have that wisdom, realizing the emptiness, or ultimate truth, or reality. And to need to have that, as we talked about the Dharma yesterday, the wisdom realizing emptiness directly. And that act as the actual antidotes towards that delusions, the ignorance. In order to have a direct realization of emptiness, first we need to have conceptually experiential understanding of the emptiness, the special insight, that is the Thubten, or special insight, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, which is induced by the karma abiding. So in order to have that special insight, then you need to have the shamatha, or karma abiding, or single pointed concentrations. In order to have that single pointed concentration, karma abiding, shamatha, then you need to have a strong foundation of moral discipline. It will be very difficult to develop karma abiding, shamatha, if you don't have the strong foundation of moral discipline. And also, of course, without moral discipline, definitely you can improve your attention, your awareness, your clarity, your concentrations. But if you really want to have the realization of karma abiding itself, shamatha, single concentration, then without that foundation, it is extremely difficult. If we let me explain this way. So when we engage in the practice of moral discipline, to be able to keep our precepts, commitments, and moral discipline, we need a strong practice of mindfulness introspection. If you don't have strong practice of mindfulness introspection, we will not be able to practice moral discipline. We will not be able to practice moral discipline well. We will not be able to keep our commitments, our precepts well, because of not being mindful and not introspections. Even though we have taken certain precepts, commitments, even we broke them, sometimes we are not even aware that we broke them. And we are unable to keep it because a lot of times we are not mindful. The more mindful you are, the more you will be able to keep them well. For example, I'm almost lying, and then my mindfulness remind, oh, that's not right to lie. That is against one of the is one of non-virtuous actions. It's against one of the precepts, the vows you have taken. So when you remember, then you stop lying. It's almost coming, and you remind that, you remember, and then you stop lying. A lot of time we already told the lie, and then suddenly we realize I lied. And now you want to take it back, but you can't take it back. That is because we not be mindful. And what it shows is you didn't, once you notice you lied, you know it was not, you shouldn't be doing that. And you didn't want to do that. But you did that because of not being mindful at the very beginning. So if you're very mindful, the moment you say, oh, I'm going to lie, so that is not right. So then you will not lie it. And so that is how it helps. That mindfulness and introspection is where we check time to time our thoughts, what's going in our mind, what thought now, what am I thinking, and in our speech, when we are communicating with others, how you are using your speech. Are you using your speech positive, healthy way, or are you using it unhealthy, negative way? And also our action, physical actions, time to time, checking, investigating, analyzing. And so that two practice and tool of introspection and mindfulness is very crucial for us to be able to practice moral discipline purely, perfectly good. And so when we engage into practice of moral discipline, so we develop those tools, okay? We develop those tools of mindfulness and introspection. And those tools are the main tool that you need to develop shamatha, kamava, and concentration. So you have already started building up your practice and tools for the next stage of the practice. For the success of karma abiding shamatha, singleton concentration, to kind of, we need to overcome the two main obstacles. One is excitement and distractions, and the one is laxity and dullness. Those two things. And to overcome them, you need a very, very strong mindfulness introspection mind. Very strong. So when we practice moral discipline, you have already building up those practice. You are already building up those practice. And so when you actually engage in the practice of concentration shamatha, then it becomes easy because you already have those practice built up. You already have those tools. So you just need to sharpen up them a little bit. And so that is how the practice of moral discipline contribute and help to the practice of shamatha, karma abiding concentration. And that practice of shamatha, karma abiding is necessary to have special insight of the wisdom. And that wisdom is the main antidote towards the ignorance and the delusions. And so through that, then then through the practice of that, whether it's three higher training or whether it's Eight Noble Path, through that, then by applying those antidotes and that path, then we can achieve total liberation in nirvana and achieve the cessations. So with that, so by practicing those three higher trainings, and even you achieve your individual liberation, total liberations, the freedom from the samsara and all the suffering. But if you are surrounded by all sentient beings who has been your most kind mother, so many times, and if they are suffering, how can you just ignore them and be satisfied with your peace? Do you get it? How can I just be happy because I'm healthy and the rest of my family members are not healthy and they need my help, and just ignore and neglect because just I'm healthy? It's not right and correct. And so, therefore, in order to help and free, not only in order to free all sentient beings from their suffering permanently and from all the suffering and cause of those suffering, then it's not enough just to have your individual liberation. Then you need to develop loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind, and then practice the bodhisattva path and achieve the fully enlightened state and become even more greatest benefit. And so then then the great scope practice comes. Then that is how great scope practice comes. The next one. And so then verse number 14. So here explaining the benefit of the bodhicitta mind. So here, ever enhancing your enlightened motive of bodhicitta is the central axle of the Mahayana path. It's the basis and foundation for the great waves of enlightened contact. So the bodhicitta mind is like the very heart of the Mahayana path, whether it is Prajna Paramita Yana or whether it is Vajrayana, both, whether it is according to just Sutra of Mahayana or whether it is Vajrayana practice, the bodhicitta mind is like the very heart of those practices. And it is the very basis and foundations of the enlightened contact of the Bodhisattva's practices, such as the practice of perfection of generosity, perfection of morality, perfection of patience, the perfections of joyous effort, perfection of concentration, perfection of wisdom. The wisdom, for example, the arhats, wisdom relies on the emptiness directly. Is a wisdom relies on emptiness directly, but it is not a perfection of the wisdom, because it is not supported by the bodhicitta mind. So it is just a wisdom. Our practice of generosity, okay, it's a practice of generosity when we practice generosity. But if it is not supported by the motivation of bodhicitta mind, then it doesn't become perfection of generosity. Okay? And so that is same with all other practices, the practice of morality, patience, and effort, joyous effort and concentration. When it is supported by the bodhicitta mind, then it becomes bodhisattva's practice. Otherwise, it just becomes practice. Of course, it's a practice of generosity, it's a practice of morality, but it's not bodhisattva's practice. And neither it becomes perfection, practice of perfections. So, bodhicitta mind is the basis for all of that. Also, when you have the bodhicitta mind, then that is where, okay, let's see. And like a gold making elixir, it turns everything you do into two collections. Building up a treasure of matter gathered from infinite collected virtues. And so the bodhicitta mind is like a elixir or alchemy to be able to, through that kind of substance, small, that can transform ordinary metal into the gold. Okay? Through that, it is able to transform ordinary metal into the gold. Same way, all our ordinary actions and activities, if we have bodhicitta mind and bodhicitta motivation, then all our ordinary activities, actions can become Dharma practice and become a way to create merit, infinite virtuous merit. And so that is like that. For example, eating, sleeping, cooking, walking, those are normally going to beach, going to lake. These are normally ordinary activities. Okay? But that ordinary activities can be non-ordinary and spiritual practice and Dharma practice if it is supported by bodhicitta mind. If it is supported by bodhicitta mind, the motivation, intention, bodhicitta mind. So wouldn't it be wonderful? At the moment we feel we don't have time to practice the Dharma, isn't it? Because we have so many other things to take care of, so many other responsibilities. So we feel we don't have time to practice the Dharma. We don't have time to accumulate the infinite merit that it needs to actualize the two collections, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom that we need to, in order to progress in our path and achieve. But if we can cultivate bodhicitta mind, then every act become cause of fully enlightened state. Every act we create merit and virtues. Every act become virtues. And so the bodhicitta mind is able to transform the ordinary activities into something extraordinary or spiritual in Dharma through the power of the bodhicitta mind, through the power of the bodhicitta motivation intentions. Then we don't have to feel that we don't have time to practice Dharma, because everything that you do become a Dharma practice. So then we don't have to be bugged by that thought, feeling guilty, I'm supposed to practice Dharma, but I'm unable to practice Dharma. I cannot find time to practice the Dharma. And that bugging thought in your mind, I should be practicing more, and I should be able to find more time to practice in that, and unable to find and fit within your schedule, because everything that you do becomes a Dharma. Isn't that wonderful? And as Shantideva explained in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, and of course also many others scriptures, the bodhicitta mind, the moment a moment of bodhicitta mind accumulate infinite virtues, merit, just a moment of that. And he said, a moment of bodhicitta mind overwhelm the merit that we create by making 7 type of precious jewel to as number as saint of the river Ganges to all the Buddhas. If you make that much offering, then the merit you create, one moment of bodhicitta mind is even more than that. It's in mind blocking. Mind blocking. Blocking. Not blocking. Boggling. Mind boggling. Okay. As Lama Tsongkhapa Rinpoche will put, unbelievable, like. So sometimes when we hear that, it seems a little bit kind of, maybe, are they a little bit exaggerating here? Isn't it? Sometimes you feel, but then here, of course, then he rely on some sutra which says that. In that sutra it says, if there was to have a form, physical form, for the benefit of a moment of bodhicitta mind, then this whole space will be too small. There is that. And then he gives the reason, and I think there is really good reasons, logic. And it's explained. For example, okay, someone has headache. Okay, someone is having headache. Just an example of someone having some pain of headache. If I have a sincere compassion wish to see that person wishing and free them from that headache, isn't it that positive and good wishes, compassion wishes? And because of that, I create a merit. So imagine 10 persons having some headache, then I have same kind of wish for 10 people. All of them, not just one, 10 people, wishing them to be free from all this, their pain and suffering. So it's 10 more times than one before. Do you get it? Mm-hmm. So when I have that for 100%, it's 100 times more stronger. Create 100 times more merit. When it's thousands, 1,000 times more. And so with the bodhicitta mind, you wish for each and every sentient being. That is limitless. And so that, not only I wish someone to be free from headache, but also I wish them to be free from the other problem as well. Maybe one other suffering, pain. And so again, instead of just once trying to wish them free from one problem, 2 problems, is more. So when you wish bodhicitta mind, each and all sentient beings, not only to wish them to be free from one suffering, but every suffering, all the suffering. Not only wishing, making a strong, firm commitment to free them from all the suffering and cause of suffering. So definitely then it's going to accumulate infinite virtues, merit in that moment, in one moment of that. And so therefore, also many of the Katambas masters and teachers, they say, when you have bodhicitta, by power of the bodhicitta itself, it purified. By the power of the bodhicitta itself, you accumulate merit. And bodhicitta is the best, most powerful way to purify negative karma, and it is the most powerful way to accumulate merit. So it's similar, is the similar way it's saying in terms of gathering the infinite collect virtues. Knowing this, Bodhisattva hold this supreme precious mind as the innermost practice. I, the yogi, have practiced that way, and you who also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in that way. So with understanding the incredible, the benefit of the bodhicitta mind, then we should inspire to cultivate that bodhicitta mind and practice to cultivate that bodhicitta mind. And the bodhicitta mind is source of your temporary happiness and is the source of your ultimate happiness. If you have bodhicitta mind, that very moment, the moment you have bodhicitta mind, it gives you the most joyful, most satisfying, blissful feeling. Because of that bodhicitta mind, if you have bodhicitta mind, and if you die with bodhicitta mind, you have no doubt that you will have a higher rebirth. Okay? If we die with bodhicitta mind, you will have a definitely better higher rebirth. And so you have happy in this life, and by the power of that, then you have a more fortunate, more high rebirth, and as well as the same peace, joyfulness, blissfulness in that. And then, as it says in many of the teachings, that within the samsara, happy to happy life, even if you have to take 3 eons of rebirth, in each of those eons, happy to happy, more and more and better, and happy to happy, through the power of bodhicitta mind, eventually achieve the highest, ultimate happiness of fully enlightened state. So, not only is the source of your temporary and ultimate happiness, is the source of happiness of other sentient beings as well. Is the source of happiness of other sentient beings as well. If you have the bodhicitta mind, you can only benefit others. You will only benefit others. You will not harm others. Only help them to bring peace and benefit and not harm. And so therefore you engage in whatever capacity you have to help them, to benefit them, and through that you bring more peace, more joy, more happiness in their life. Not only temporary happiness, but also ultimate happiness in their life. So you become, through the power of that bodhicitta, you become, you and the bodhicitta is then become source of others, all other sentient beings, temporary happiness and ultimate happiness, and their peace. And as Shantideva says, the bodhicitta mind is the most reliable and the best friend ordinary friend, they can become an enemy, they can become strangers. So by becoming an enemy, even though they are helpful now, they might be harmful in the futures. By becoming a stranger, even though they are helpful now, they might not be helpful anymore, even they don't become harmful. But when you have been befriended with the Bodhicitta mind, then it always helps and benefit you all the time. It never harms you, it never not benefit you and help you. And so he said that there is nothing more supreme friend than by being friend with the Bodhicitta mind. There's nothing more virtuous than the Bodhicitta mind in terms of purification, purifying negative karma, in terms of creating merit. There is nothing more reliable teachers or guidance or protector than the Bodhicitta mind. If you have Bodhicitta mind, you can be assured that you will be guided in this life, in the Fardo, and in the future life. I remember one time, I don't know when it was, but one time when His Holiness the Lama was teaching, and he was teaching on Bodhicitta, in a section on Bodhicitta, and then he recited a verse from Guru Puja Lama Tsongkhapa, where they say is in that sense is referring to the Guru, that you are the Kyone Lama, Kyone Idam, Kyone Kanto Shokyon. Then is from that verses where you say you are the Guru, you are the Idam, you are the Buddha, you are the Daga Daginis, you are the protectors from now on in this life, in Parto, in all future life, until you achieve enlightenment through the power of your hook of your compassions. Please bless me to be liberated from the fear of samsara and the and then to bless and all this, and to protect and that. So that prayer, and He's only used that for Bodhicitta, and he said Bodhicitta is the Guru, Bodhicitta is the Idam, Bodhicitta is the Buddha, Bodhicitta is the protector, and that can protect us. Bodhicitta one which can bless us, Bodhicitta one which can free us from the samsara and the individual liberation, is the one which can protect us. And then he said, His Holiness says, he always relied on Bodhicitta, and also he said when he died, he will totally rely on Bodhicitta. So again, so similar. So the more, so it will be to have even more better understanding of this. Then, if you study the first chapter of the Bodhisattva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, is the benefit of the Bodhicitta mind. And so then he gives very details in that. And so if you study that, then the more you learn, the more you hear, the more you study, the more it gives you inspirations to cultivate that Bodhicitta mind. It gives you more kind of energy, more kind of inspirations. And so that is why we reflect, contemplate and meditate on the benefit of Bodhicitta mind, as Lama Tsongkhapa explained here, so that we can be inspired. And through that, by inspired, then we practice to cultivate the Bodhicitta mind. So then, there is not particular verses how to cultivate bodhicitta itself in these verses. So then next verses, then he go to the practice of six perfections. So together with the benefit, with this verse number 14, together with the benefit, then he also indirectly explains how to achieve or how to cultivate the bodhicitta mind. And so maybe probably it's almost time for stop. So maybe we can continue when we come together after the lunch break. And so if there is questions, I can take one or two questions before. Yes, please.
Yes, what was you mentioned the first chapter of how to cultivate the bodhicitta mind is the first chapter
of Guides to Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Anila.
Yes, Lama. A few questions about karma and how to think of it. One is, I don't understand how specific it is. Like if someone hurts you or steals from you, is it better for our mind to think, oh, I must have hurt this person specifically in some life? Or is it better to think, oh, in some life I hurt someone? Is there a difference between those two things?
Well, I think the possibility is from the other side. It is possible that you might have hurt that person directly, or maybe you might have hurt someone and then due to your karmic magnet, you pull that person to get involved to ripen up your karma. So maybe even though it wasn't directly with that person, it could be. But I think it is more helpful to think that I must have hurt that person. And so then I think it is more easier for us to kind of not to have a negative feelings towards that person, because it's like you have cheated them, you have hurt them, and so therefore you are being kind of cheated or hurt because of that. So it is. So I think it is more easier if you see that it is because I have harmed that person in the past. So that is why I think that thinking is more powerful in terms of letting go of negative, bad feeling towards that person. Yeah.
Also, Geshe, if I don't also understand how karma works in combination. For example, if you're a parent, you have a child and that child might become sick or die or something, you can see that as that child's karma, maybe short life force. You don't regard yourself as the cause of that, but it definitely has an impact on you. Do you think, oh, I served as the cause and condition? How do you think about that?
Well, I think due to that person's, anyone, whether it's children's or your family, any other family members, whatever, due to whatever karmic result, whatever they are experiencing, whatever they might be going through, but that affect you in certain way, in a negative way, in a sense that it bring you a lot of pain and suffering, and that suffering or that feeling of pain and suffering is a result of your previous karma. And so something is a result of your previous karma. It's not about whether it's not about you contributing for their cases or they're contributing, but is is a result of some negative karma of that we have created pain and harm to someone or some in the past. Did you get it? Or maybe I didn't go.
No, it just made me change things inside my head. So, let's say, this is the way my head works on that. Then you say, well, I love that person,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to relieve them of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see them suffering, it causes you suffering. I don't think that's the suffering of attachment. I think that's compassion. But then the pain that you feel at their suffering is the result of your having caused suffering to someone.
Mm-hmm. I think there might be a kind of fine lines. And I think maybe sometimes those subtle and fine lines, and I think sometimes it might be a little bit kind of difficult for us to differentiate whether it's that feeling of pain, unbearable feeling of pain, whether it's coming from true compassion or whether it's coming from attachments for us, because in our cases it is kind of mixed up. So it is not so easy to differentiate, There is some level of compassion and there is some level of attachment. And so when they are so mixed, so it is so hard to know whether that my feeling of that unbearable, of that pain, whether it's coming from because it's not so clear cut in our two feelings of attachment and true love. It's kind of so mixed up in that way, so it becomes very, very difficult to kind of differentiate for us. So that becomes more difficult in that sense. But generally speaking, it is explained when you have true compassion. So we are not even talking about. We are talking more about. We are not talking about emotional compassion, biological emotional compassions. We are talking about when you develop through practice over the time, when you develop true love compassions, not the same like the emotional or the biological compassion that we have, but on the basis of training, mind training, with certain points we work on. And when you are able to develop that kind of true love and compassion, then when you see and feel the pain or suffering, definitely you have some level of unbearable of that. Okay? Little bit of unbearable pain of that. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't become overwhelming. Okay? It doesn't become overwhelming like that it happens at the moment. Because you have very strong, due to your training with that, you have a very strong mental strength, courageous. With that strong courage and that strong strength, so then you feel the pain, suffering, and a little bit of unbearable, but you have control over that, and it doesn't become overwhelming, overpowering. And so one of the example I like to give in concerning that, I find myself it's something I have thought about and something I find helpful I say like that, when you have true compassion and bodhicitta that we have cultivated, developed with the practice, then you begin to build up the inner strength and courage, confidence, unshakable, unmovable. So it's like in the depth of the oceans, there's the stillness, okay? That cannot be disturbed by the waves on the surface. That stillness on the depth of the water will not be disturbed by that. Okay? So like that, we have that kind of unshakable, unmovable stillness, and strength, and the depth. So while that cannot be disturbed, at the same time when there is waves, small, big, whatever waves, the oceans feel that wave. Yeah? But the stillness, depth that is there cannot be disturbed. Same way, when we have that kind of bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, when we see the suffering and pain of others, we feel it, just like the oceans feel the waves. That doesn't mean that we don't feel at all. We feel it. We can feel it, and there is some kind of pain, unbearable. But at the same time, there is that strong stillness, depth. So therefore, it doesn't kind of overwhelm us the way it, at the moment, that's at the moment when we see the pain and suffering, then it overwhelm and it will overpower us, then we don't know how to deal with it. And so yeah, like that. And I was giving some example, I mean, of course, this is just my observation, and I'm trying to kind of put things together in perspective, but I could be totally wrong. It's just my my way of thinking, putting things. Probably many of you might have also observed it. I've observed many times when he's one of the lamas, when his teachings. I've seen many times, especially when it comes to chapter loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta. In the teaching, suddenly when it comes, there's tears. Tears naturally comes, and so you can see he's choking and he's trying to continue the teaching, but he's unable to continue the teachings, and tears and that. And I think because of it, he can feel the pain and sufferings of the other sentient beings. So there's that kind of unbearableness, the pain. He can feel the pain and suffering and unbearableness. At the same time, after a few moments, he just goes normal, and as nothing has happened back, because of that stillness, of that strength. So it doesn't, he feel it, but it doesn't overwhelm him. So, so that is how, at least from my point of view, that is how I relate with that, with this. Okay. Okay. So, Sanju Rinpoche, Ma Ge Ba Na Ke Hue Te Kya Wa Nya Ba.